Welcome to Techtastic, where we navigate the intersection of technology and business, uncovering innovations that redefine our world.
Hannah, I want to say thank you for coming on to Techtastic. It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So you have a passion project around helping people avoid burnout, and specifically burnout from tech. And it's something that I'm personally very conscious of because I'm constantly surrounded by it. And I've made some pretty severe life choices to help me not burn out because I felt it coming. But this is a passion project of yours. You have advice for people on this. You've made changes in your own life about it. Tell me about finding your passion here and what you're doing about it.
Absolutely. So this all started with me burning out. Surprise. So back in, I think it was 2017, I hit a wall and I was working full time in tech and I had, young children under the age of 3. And I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get out of bed for a month and I didn't know why. Go to the doctors, got all the tests done and everything came back and they're like, you're fine, except for that, you're not getting up. So I was just completely fried. And it frightened me because I had worked hard to get into this career. I didn't want to lose my job because I wasn't showing up for it. I cared. I just didn't care because I was fried. I didn't want to not be able to show up as the mom I wanted to be for my kids because I had no energy. I didn't want to lose my marriage because I was too exhausted to give anything. So I felt like I had really important things on the line that I had to shift my approach to life. And I made ending burnout my number one priority. And it took a while, but I did turn it around without quitting my job, without burning down my career. And in the process, I learned that, I've met so many other women who have lost their careers, their health, their marriages, who've missed years of their children's lives because they were so fried that they felt like they had nothing left to give. So they just walked away in one way or another. And so I feel like I feel called or motivated to help others understand that you can end burnout. You don't have to dread your job. You don't have to hate getting up in the morning. You don't have to go through life feeling like your soul is being sucked out of your body. It can be stopped. It can be turned around. You don't even have to quit your job. So that's why I'm here and why I'm excited to share.
There's a related topic here that my wife and I talk about a little bit. She's opened my eyes to it at least. I'm very, very focused on the businesses, fully absorbed in that, which puts a lot of emotional, mental burden on her for all the things that aren't work, like figuring out grocery lists for the week or, just the basic things that you have to do in life. Also, she tends to be more of a planner than I am just naturally. She cares more about the details, whereas I tend to be more about, we'll figure it out. I would say that I hate assigning anything to gender-specific norms, but there does seem to be more women have had to take on that role in relationships. They're the caretakers, the nurturers in most relationships. And whether that's societal or what, it's true that happens a lot. And that cannot help with burnout. I mean, it's just one more thing you've got to carry and worry about.
Mm-hmm. You are absolutely correct. And I think that is why women are reporting burnout in higher numbers. And I think it's exactly that. It's that second shift. It's that third shift. Things have gotten better, obviously, every decade, things are shifting a little bit. But I think statistically, most women do end up with the role of household manager and care provider, whether that's of children or of their parents or, maintaining those family ties. They end up in that role, whether they're good at it or not. It just kind of defaults to that. Not always, but many times it does. And yeah, so that does contribute to the never off. You feel like you never get time for yourself. You never get time to invest in your own health. And I think that in combination with, I work with a lot of people who are in tech, the never ending aspect of the job, if you're working with people across, in India or in Europe, the day never ends, right?
Yeah.
You're always on. You've got meetings at 7 a.m., you've got meetings at 9 p.m. How do you create a life with that? And I think that that's a really poignant conversation to have, especially at this point in our lives where I think tech use is increasing. And I think AI is going to have a big impact on how it just kind of permeates every aspect of our lives. We're not there yet, early days. But so I think having conversations around how to intentionally design your life in a way that fills you as a human being, as a complete human being, not just a head on a body who's working and getting through all the checklists every single day, but gives you, that white space and margin and brings that back into your life.
We talked about before we started recording some life changes we've both made, are slight differences, but very similar, right? We're both in technology roles. We both have been surrounded by it for a while. I tend to think of my cell phone or anything that somebody can reach me as a digital leash. It's the thing that holds me back to whoever's pulling on the leash. And when you're running a business and you've got employees, all of them have that leash. And if you've got customers, they all have that leash. And so I've very intentionally made my life such that the moment I decide I'm not working, there is no way to get a hold of me. I'm unavailable. And it is the only thing that stops that problem from being 24/7. Because I've literally had teams in India call me at 2 in the morning and it was critical. And there was no way I could say no.
Yes, I've had the Christmas Eve calls, like the the never-ending aspect of working in tech. But and what you've done is exactly what needs to happen. Whether you're the boss or the employee or wherever your role is, having a clear definition of on and off and having that be respected is critical. So I know, in my own negotiations, I said, from these hours to this hours is sacred time. I'm spending time with my family. I'm flexible pretty much around the clock otherwise. But with periods when I take a break, I take a break. I leave my phone in the car when I go for a hike. I'm not taking it with me. And I did intentionally, like you said, I moved to an area where there's a lot of Wi-Fi gaps. So if I want to step away, it's actually pretty easy. I just need to go for a hike and it's hard to reach me. And that was done with intention. I had been living in a city and working in a way where I was just always on. And I felt like I always had to be on. I felt like people expected it. I felt like that was the norm. And in the culture of the company that I was at the time, it was. Like it was an always on culture. It was a constant visibility sort of a situation. And, different cultures and different companies either honor or don't honor that work-life boundaries, because you're setting a line, right? You're putting up a wall. You're like, I'm on or I'm off. And I think as leaders, because I know a lot of your listeners are in leadership or even starting your own company, you get to define that. You don't have to be at the whim of, being in a reactive space. You're in a position of creation. You're in a position where you can define that and defend that and create that space and stand for your employees. And I think that is amazing. And I've seen it done successfully, and it makes a big difference in the culture and in the productivity.
I've often said, like when I was at larger companies, when they create that always on culture, I said, this is a failure of leadership.
It is.
Right. You do not do your best work when you're exhausted or burned out. You do your best work when you're relaxed and you've had time to consider and, you've got clarity of purpose. And if we're not giving you clarity of purpose and we're not giving you the space and the resources to do your job, well, that's our fault. So when we call you in on a Saturday, I failed.
Right.
Putting that on my leadership teams and putting that on myself really changed how we approached it. It was like, are we this bad at our jobs that we need to call the team in? And that completely changes the dynamic.
Yes. When I took on a management role, one of the things that I was sure to do with my directs was, ask them on a scale of, 1 to 10, 1 being you're bored, falling asleep at your desk, 10 being you're completely overwhelmed, your head's about to explode, where are you? And it was like a weekly check-in, where are you? Where are you? And when the team starts to rise up and everyone's at an 8, 9, and it's not going down, then it's like, okay, something needs to shift. We need either more resources or we need more time.
Or the one that I think most people fail to think about, because most of those conversations tend to be about more of something, more time or more resources. But the question I will always ask when all I hear is more is, what can we do less of?
Yes.
Right? Are there meetings that we don't need? Are there tasks that we're doing that are not useful? And we have ways of evaluating that, of course. You don't just say, I don't feel like doing it. Okay, great. What's the value it's providing? If it's not greater than the effort being put in, we're not doing it.
Yes. I love elimination. It's one of my favorite things. And it's the first thing I do whenever a task comes in is, does this have to be done?
Yeah.
Is this important? Does this have to be done by us?
That's
like I go through the process. Yeah. Like, can I get rid of this before I say yes?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that's always bugged me about product leaders, and I am a product leader myself as a founder, you all just are, is that it always is a game of addition. I need to add more features. Need to add more complexity to it. And I'm like, for me, elegance is in the simplicity of it. Can I do the job better by taking something away that isn't helping you do the job? My least favorite tools are the ones I've used for the longest. Like at the very, very beginning of computer graphics, there was the Commodore 64 had a Koala pad, which was a drawing tablet you could use on it. And all it was you had some colors and a little brush, and then you could use it just like a paint palette almost. And the closer the tools stay to that simplicity, the better they are to use. You can add functionality without adding complexity. But if you've used Photoshop for the last 30 years, it went from a very easy to use tool to one you practically need a PhD in the tool to use. And that's a mistake that in technology, we always want to add more. And in our lives, that's true too. It's not so much my generation, but I do notice it a lot more with people that are younger than me that are in the workforce. And I recognize that that's because the cost of living has increased, the ability to buy a house has decreased, and wages haven't kept up. So there's almost this need just to maintain the status quo to have that additional source of income. But not having that poetic time where your brain can dream and imagine and solve problems on its own means that you're not as productive as you would be if you just took that time and did nothing. Go for a walk, turn the brain off. There's a researcher at the University of British Columbia in Canada. He's incorporated like Eastern philosophy, especially like ancient Chinese philosophy, on the idea of kind of, I'm trying to remember the way we talk about it, like practice makes perfect. And if you don't do well, just keep trying harder. That's kind of the Western ideal that comes from philosophy. The Eastern philosophy is the opposite. You want to get to the state where you don't have to try hard anymore. Like, I don't make beautiful music by trying really hard to play. I'm not a great tennis player because I'm trying really hard to win. I'm a great tennis player because it comes naturally now, because I practice it to the point where I'm just in the zone, that flow state. You can't be in the flow state if you're constantly busy.
True. That is such a good point that you're making. The intentionality around doing less, both as a product designer or a leader or in your own life to prevent burnout, is about, I think, having a really clear idea of what you're saying yes to. So I think that's actually like the first step of ending burnout is pursuing your yes. In a company, as a leader, you have to get really clear on what are you going to be good at as a company? Who are you going to serve? Get crystal clear, really tight. In our personal lives, to prevent burnout, to end burnout, we have to get really clear about, well, what matters to me? What are my priorities? Am I living in alignment with those priorities? Am I pursuing my career in a way that is in alignment with what matters to me? Am I on the right projects? And once you have a clear yes, crystal clear, tightly focused, then everything else becomes so much easier to say no to the things that are cool, but aren't going to move you towards that yes.
Yeah.
Because we all have shiny object syndrome. We're humans, right? It's in product leadership, as you mentioned, but it's also in our lives. So you don't have to say yes to everything, but get really clear on what you are saying yes to. And another thing that you mentioned that I love is that white space in life that used to exist. Because I grew up before the phone, before the interwebs, and there used to be white space. There used to be margin in our day. Yeah. And now there kind of isn't, because we always have access to distractions. If you're in between meetings, if you're going to the bathroom, if you're in bed right before going to sleep, what are you doing? Most people are scrolling. And I think we all are in tech. I think we all have an understanding of what scrolling does to the brain, but it is addictive and it does cause or increase the likelihood of anxiety and depression because of that pattern of the dopamine releasing. And so as far as just burnout in general increasing, I think that that's part of it, is that we've lost the margin in our lives. We've lost that white space. Not only are we filling it with something that causes stress and anxiety, but we've lost that white space where we used to be able to complete the stress cycle. If you have time in between meetings, what are you doing? You're processing. You're going through the process of letting it go, of letting it all sink in. If you have enough time to go for a walk during your lunch break, instead you're scrolling, but if you go for a walk, that movement helps to complete the stress cycle so that you're not carrying it with you month after month, or year after year. And that results in some cases, the expression of that is burnout. And then at night, of course, the lack of sleep quality is huge. And staring at our phones is a big culprit behind that.
So one of the things that you just said reminded me of I'm a polymath. Like I've been writing code since I was pretty young. I've also been a painter and a sculptor since I was young, and music and all the fun stuff. But that's because I was introduced to all those things and then given time to explore and play with them and get good enough that I was comfortable with it, but not a master at any of them. My friends say that I say I'm the jack of all trades and master of none. And they're like, no, you're the master of many. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not, though. You pick any one of those spaces and not the master. I'm good, not great. And I like being good, but not great. Because for me, what's interesting is the exploration of how things can connect and how I can create new things by grabbing a bit of this and a bit of this. And there's a conference in Portland, Oregon every year called Draw Code. And it tends to be people that are both artists and coders, like technologists. And what they all have in common is this concept of poetic time, where nobody has a brilliant revelation while working hard at the computer. They solve the hard problem when they're out on a walk, they're in the shower, or as our product leader on my company said, he's got a magic lawnmower. When he's sitting on it and he's doing his lawn, that's when all the insights happen. Like, that's right. It's when you're in that moment of not thinking about it that the clarity comes in, because your brain's not working hard to solve for it. Free-forming associations are occurring where poetry gets written.
I love that.
I watched it with my niece and my nephew. I love them to death, but they're now in their 20s, and they were raised with constantly having to be doing something. They went from soccer practice to Boy Scouts to like whatever it was, to band, to the next thing. They didn't have any free time. And in school early, they got rid of recess. The one time in the day that the stress of sitting at a desk and being patient as a child, full of energy and not really knowing how to sit still, the one time you get to release all that stress and potentially have that white space brain time was removed. Like, how are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we allowing this to happen? Because what we're doing is we're going to create an entire society of people who are full of anxiety and incapable of accomplishing anything. Because
but they're busy and they feel like they are.
Yeah, busy. The whole busy culture nonsense. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've seen that raising my own children. It is hard to be a working mom and not have your kids constantly in a camp or in a thing, right? I do create space for boredom, and they come and they complain, I'm bored. I'm like, my job's not to entertain you. Go play. I bought you toys. Should I take them away? Are you going to play with them or not? Maybe I'm harsh. But anyways, I do think that boredom is valuable. And one of my priorities in my own life, and I set this as the priority after my burnout, because I do tend to be an ambitious person who is going after the next thing and has a checklist every single day. Like, I'm very organized and driven. But what I missed from, if you think back to my childhood, is I had time to wander. I had time to wander through books, through ideas, through nature. I had space to wander, and then I had space to create. So there was drawing and writing and all these ways of expressing what had percolated and happened and meshed in that time of wandering. And so now wandering is high on my priority list as something that is a value in my life that I am protecting and pursuing, is time to wander, space to wander.
That's fantastic. The other thing that I noticed is like the anxiety created by the fear of failure.
Yes.
My opinion on that is you never learn if you don't fail. You can never succeed if you haven't learned, and you can't learn if you haven't failed. I put a lot on social media because you see everybody else telling the glory moment, not all the work that went to get there. They're sharing their happiest, most exciting, like a view of that. It's probably not even true. That's what everybody's doing. And so nobody feels like their own lives are living up to that unless they have that win too. And if they don't get it instantly, they feel like a failure because they see everybody else showing their wins. And I think that that's a huge detractor from people actually trying things and learning, failing, all of it. And you need that playtime, that white space when you're able to explore to have any chance of that.
And kind of going along with that, with the busyness and the hustle culture, is I've seen, the women I work with, they are afraid. I mean, they're showing up because they're afraid. They feel like they have to prove themselves. They're constantly proving themselves. They are on all the time on IM because they feel like they need to be seen. They are over committing themselves because they feel like they need to prove themselves. They feel like being busy is equal to being worthy. And breaking that association and reframing that is, a big chore. Like, it's a lot of work, but it is so powerful when we realize that we're worthy because we are. And busyness is not a badge of honor. And it's actually not making you more productive. It's not good for your career. Like, focus is, deep work is, building strong relationships is, but busyness for the sake of busyness, being seen for the sake of being seen is it's a coming out of a place of fear.
There's one more aspect I keep thinking about, and that's because the business I'm in is, I think of technology modernization as a treadmill. You can't get off of it because technology is evolving faster than our ability to implement technology, right? So every day that you modernize, you've actually created tech debt because it's not modern anymore. And so everybody's on that cycle, and that cycle's accelerating largely due to things like AI, but it's always been fairly rapid. I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and during that time, there's never been a moment where you could feel like you were an expert, because the instant you were an expert in something, that something wasn't worth doing anymore.
Yes.
And I think that has a huge impact on people that are in the technology space, is that there's no such thing as deep expertise anymore. You can't get comfortable with the status quo. You have to constantly be learning and adapting. And the problem, though, is we are the experts. We are trusted to be deep experts. How do you resolve that in your career and in your personal life when it is evolving too fast to keep up with? You're expected to be the expert. You can't, because there's not enough time to develop that expertise. Most people spend more time. They just throw everything they've got, all their time, into becoming something impossible to become, and burn out extraordinarily rapidly because of it.
I hear you. It's something that I was thinking about back. I made a career shift from development into UX. And part of my thinking was development is like you're on that never-ending treadmill of something new. Whereas UX, you go deep into psychology. It's about being an expert on humans and their relationship with tech. So you still have to stay modern, you still have to stay current, but I found it more sustainable. But as far as like, what do you do, right? If you're supposed to be the expert at all times. And I think that the answer is community, that we can't always pretend like we are the deep experts on everything. And I think that that's okay. I think it's okay to say, I know this person over here and I'm going to leverage their expertise. I know this person over here and I'm going to leverage their expertise. We can do this together. And then there's also like almost like a seasonality, I feel like, to learning, where you lean in and you're just heads down, you're cranking, you're learning something new, and then you lean out and let it process. If you're always leaning in and the motivation is fear, like we talked about earlier, because you're afraid of falling behind, because you're afraid of someone looking down on you, because you're afraid of not being good enough, you're going to burn out. You're going to push yourself too far, and the fear is going to drag you down. So I think being intentional with leaning in and intentional with leaning out and allowing, I guess, like the flow of technology growth, just ride the wave. You know, don't expect that you're going to be ahead of the wave. You will not be ahead of the wave. Sometimes you're going to fall off the wave, and that's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Just get back up. Everyone around you is doing the same thing.
Another way to approach it, and this is what I think our job as technologists is, we tend to think of ourselves as the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, when the Oz was trying to there's magic happening, and he didn't want anybody to see how it was done. And my view has always been, that's not our job. Our job is to help them make it be done. Whether we show them how or not does not matter. That myth that the magic is exclusive to us as magicians is just terrible for our own well-being. Show them how to learn, because that's what we have to do. Even if it is just saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go find out. Would you like to come along with me on that journey?
Right. I think that's the most powerful thing to say, because we're all learning right now. We're all growing. AI is happening faster than any of us can keep up with. It's going to be more and more like that, where it's a constant, well, let's all figure it out.
Hannah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. This was a great topic.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious. Thank you for listening. If you are new here and enjoyed the content, please subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are a regular listener, thanks so much for your continued support.
Overwhelmed by tech debt? Discover Vala AI, the solution to tech challenges with the simplicity of a click. No engineering background? No problem. Vala AI enables anyone to effortlessly tackle tech issues, freeing up your time from tech headaches. Make tech debt vanish with Vala AI, where your tech solutions are just a click away.